Can you imagine naming a trustee who turns out to be someone you didn't know? Like they become a drug addict or an alcoholic or a spendthrift, or they don't distribute assets according to your wishes, meaning your children need money or your spouse needs money and they refuse to give them money. What if they start becoming a silent partner where they're stealing money? Oh, what we're going to cover today is really the good and bad and ugly of trustees. And I've asked my peer and financial transition certified advisor, Susan Swinehart, who's also an attorney, to join us. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Annette Bau, host of the Wealth Inside and Out podcast and founder of the Millionaire Insider. My mission is to help you simplify the money game so you can create a financially secure and fulfilled life without having to have a PhD or spend countless hours on your finances. You're going to learn how to think like a millionaire, stop worrying about money and wondering if your financial house is truly in order, and instead spend your time doing what you love. With over 3 decades advising 7, 8, and even 9-figure millionaires, and now joining that elite group, I'm in a unique position to help you make the best financial choices so you can create a secure financial future and retirement you love. This is the Wealth Inside and Out podcast. To access your free financial checkup, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/FC. Most people understand the importance of a medical checkup and they get them regularly. Well, the same is true of your finances. You need to be having a checkup to make sure everything's in order and that you don't have some major surprise that could literally delay or even ruin your retirement. So again, themillionaireinsider.com/FC. It's free, it's easy, and it's very insightful. Our free resource today is the estate planning checklist. You can go to themillionaireinsider.com/EPC. All materials, forms, and intellectual property are copywritten by themillionaireseries.com. The information we provide is for educational purposes only. It is not intended to replace any advisor or specialist or to provide any investment, financial, tax, retirement, any planning, especially estate planning, since that's what we're talking about today, or other type of advice. By accessing the content, you would agree to hold millionaireseries.com and its affiliates harmless for results achieved or not achieved. For today's show notes, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/75. So I'm welcoming Susan back. We just were having a different interview and now we're talking about trustees. So welcome, Susan.
Hi.
It's great to have you on the call.
Thanks for having me back.
Yes. Always so
exciting. Good thing.
It was, and it's always so insightful. So today we're going to be diving into roles and responsibilities of trustees, options of who can serve as a trustee, pros and cons, as well as some different insight on succession planning and some real world case studies of great trustees and nightmare trustees so that you can make the right choice in your situation. So the first thing I want to dive into, just so everyone's on the same page, can you tell everyone what a trustee is, Susan?
A trustee is a person, sometimes, not always. It can be banks, it can be trust companies, it can be anything that oversees a trust. But a trust is a vehicle or something somebody does instead of a will or in addition to a will, usually, because it's addition to a part of a will. And it has all the assets in that belong to the person who's passed. And so that's what a trust is.
Okay. And then the trustee is a person managing that the grantor or the settlor elects to manage it.
Right.
And you want to make sure that person is capable of those responsibilities.
Yes. And sometimes people think they are, when a person appoints a trustee, they think the person's capable, but then they find it's not because they don't have the knowledge, the patience, the time, or they just can't handle it.
Yeah. We were talking about earlier is sometimes people name attorneys, CPAs, professionals, which typically a financial advisor could not be a trustee, or you can name a corporate trustee or an individual. And we're going to dive into some of the pros and cons of those because there are pros and cons. The one thing to remember when it comes to a trustee is you have the successor trustee, and then you want to make sure that you have somebody else in line in case that person is unable to or doesn't want to. Like Susan says, they start off and they're like, oh, sure, I can do it. And then they're like, oh my gosh, this is so much work. I don't want to do it. So it's really important to think of those contingencies that a lot of people don't because they've never done it. And I will just say from a recent case where we transitioned to the successor trustee, she is like, this is the most overwhelming experience I've ever had. And she's like, I'm so glad you're here to be able to help navigate that. And I think having an attorney is critical, but also having a really good financial advisor that can help navigate that process is huge because I can just say, I mean, I'm thinking of like literally 4 or 5 different situations that if they did not have a financial advisor helping them, I think it would have been a nightmare for the very reason you said. They just are not capable of it. They're not knowledgeable enough. And most kids aren't, meaning like most family members aren't. And sometimes, as we're going to talk about it in a little bit, professionals aren't either. What I find personally, now granted, I mean, I'm involved in the mix, but what I find is when there is a person and a financial advisor and a CPA and the attorney, that's ideal because there's a little bit of a check and balance. You've got some people helping you, but you also have some accountability to make sure that the different advisors are watching the other advisors to make sure everything's going right. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Susan.
Yes, I do. It needs to be in the trust that if it's at a bank, that they use a financial advisor and it's in the document because oftentimes banks try to control it. And what I've had the experience with one of my clients, family had a bank do it and the trust lasted a number of years. Well, you want everybody to be prudent, but the bank overdid the prudency and the fees eroded the trust. And so it was almost nothing over a period of years. So you need to request that a financial advisor have input.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that would be a lot of times that the financial advisor is actually managing the money or it's a separate person from the trust. I do think that is important. And to add to that, I have a friend who inherited money from a brother, but the trustee happens to be a CPA and he has managed that money so conservatively. I mean, they have earned like 1% a year. I mean, the market was doing like 15%. She's like, is there anything I can do? I'm like, you're going to have somebody review that trust and you're going to have to try to either get somebody else appointed, over the course of time, if you look at the market over a period of time, on average, it does like 10.8%, like over 10%. Right. And it had done not even 1%. So you can imagine, I mean, it was like the difference of that she was getting $5,000 a year versus $50,000. I mean, that's not pocket change. And it was so frustrating for them. But what were you going to say, Susan?
Yeah, over the lifetime of the market, that's the average.
Yes. Well, and it is over that, but it's also if they break it up on certain periods, like you keep it for a decade or something like that, it still is done.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just something to be aware of. It's obviously not a guarantee, but it's some gauge of saying over the course of time, it has a tendency of performing. Sometimes it's going to do better. Sometimes it's going to do worse, but on average.
That's the average. Yep.
So let's talk about choosing a family member because a lot of my clients do. And I think when I start thinking about it, they do because they think, I'm here to help, right? Sometimes you've got a good advisor that is helping and sometimes you don't. So let's first of all talk about some of the pros of having a family member as the trustee.
Well, a pro of having a family member sometimes is that they may not charge a fee, and it's pretty typical for a person to take 1% of the assets, but they may not do that. Also, they know the inner workings of the family, so they have an insight into that. But oftentimes, I think those are the only two things. I see actually more cons than pros because most people aren't tuned into being a trustee and how they do it. And, the parents, if they choose a child, they often think they can just simpler and they have the info, they feel comfortable with them. So that's an advantage there. But the cons, I think, outweigh it more because how many times are you trustee? How many times do you ever do that in your life? It's not like we do it every day to be a trustee, but a person does that. So the cons outweigh. And
well, let me just comment on that for 1 minute and throw out another idea. I think that it depends because I think sometimes I totally agree with that. But I also think that I'm a lot more inclined to have family members be a trustee when it's going to be their money. For example, right now my kids are too young, especially my boys. But when they get to a certain age, they're going to be able to take over as the co-trustee. And my thought process is if they make really bad choices and they don't do good job, even though they're required to have an investment advisor to help them manage it, well, then guess what? They're going to be broke. It's their money. I do find that when family members, because like right now I have somebody who would never be able to be trustee if it was just her. Like she just couldn't do it. I mean, she just said even recently, I don't know what I'd do without you. I'm like, that's so nice to say, but it is true. She just would have no clue. That said, because it's her money, she does pay attention and she does what she needs to do. Whereas sometimes what I find is like you name a brother-in-law or you name a brother or a sister, and they're overwhelmed. They've got their job. This isn't benefiting them in any way other than they're trying to do a service to the deceased. And it's a nightmare. And so do you find that though it kind of depends on who is the ultimate beneficiary?
Well, that would be true. But, I have a case where one of the ultimate beneficiaries is a daughter who is a CPA, and she's been able to finagle the trust because the other two don't have the knowledge. And so we think she's taken the money. And then, it's a situation where her mom passed at least 5 years ago, and everybody's trying to still figure out what was in the trust. And, there's supposed to be an accounting every year, which somehow she's not doing that. She's getting by with that. And you know how it is. The courts don't really want to delve in unless you can prove there's something that shouldn't be
Well,
going on.
let me
And they
ask a
can't.
question. Who is the trustee? Just her?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me make a comment on that. Okay, I think that is a big mistake. I think that in the event, the provisions I like to see is it's two of them. It's never just one.
Right.
And I also like to have provisions in there. Now we have a trust protector. On larger estates, I like to see a trust protector. It happens to be my securities attorney, who I'm like, if anyone would know if something's going on wrong, it'd be him. But he's not available for other clients. I tried to talk him into doing one of my clients. He's like, I'm not interested. I'm like, okay, you got to stay on for me though. But the point being is that there also should be, in my opinion, provisions that if there, say, are three beneficiaries, and let's just say one person is acting kooky or not doing a good job, as long as the trust protector agrees, they can replace that person. So you can put provisions in there. Now, in this situation, I'm assuming because this person's a CPA, that they kind of assumed, oh, they know what's going on. Haven't you just petitioned the court and say, we want an accounting? Because legally she's required to.
You can, but it's just really hard. I mean, it's just really hard. We're trying to dig into it. And with her siblings, she's so overbearing. It's just another attorney was working on that case because it's not right here in my county. And they just can't get anywhere. And this has been going on for years. And who knows what she's done with the money. She got a new car. Her sister got a new car, but she won't give the brother any money because she's telling him she can't get it for him because she'll run out of money in the trust for him. We know that's not true.
Yeah, but see, it's like something like that where it's so blatantly obvious that something's going on. Granted, Susan's in a much smaller community. Like in Arizona, that would be in court in a nanosecond, and there would be an order of either a guardian ad litem or a third party. There would be someone looking at it. Now, this is something, though, to take into account. A lot of times when you're in smaller communities, it's a whole different ballgame as compared to when you're in larger ones, and the last thing they want to do is be on the front page of the paper saying money was being stolen. They wouldn't do anything about it. I think in a situation like that, typically what I have seen happen, because I have seen situations like that, they just petition the court and accounting is required. Accounting is required once a trust becomes irrevocable. Now, a lot of people don't do it because if they're the beneficiaries and the trustees, they don't. But in a case where it's kind of like gray, I would think that you would just request an accounting. Have you requested an accounting?
Well, they haven't. No, there's been no, I haven't. That's not I mean, you know what I mean? It's a situation, but I am involved in it. But I told them they need to go to that county and get that done. But they're afraid of her. That's the whole thing. She intimidates them.
Well, don't they? Who's there representing the brother?
Well, that's the problem. He doesn't have the money to do it because he can't get the money. And so right now, nobody is. His niece is trying to help him, but then he's schizophrenic. So then he freaks out. She can't get him to commit.
Well, see, that's a problem. It's like somebody's complaining about it. This is happening, and then they don't have the money and they don't do anything. So somebody's got to. I mean, the other option that you could do is even report it to the CPA board. If she's a CPA and say, we have concerns here, we don't know what's going on, it's possible that they would take action because the last thing they want is some CPA who is stealing money, God forbid, if that's the case.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think sometimes you have to look into it, but there's also probably a reason why he wasn't named as co-trustee if he is schizophrenic, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But he has
then,
another sister that she could have, and she wasn't.
is the other sister getting any accounting, or does she think money's being taken?
No, because she doesn't understand it. It's just that because the sister who's the CPA, they think she knows everything and everybody and thinks that she has it so that they can't, everybody will be on her side. You know how that goes. She just knows too many people.
So who's complaining about all this? Does the other sister have money, or is she just afraid of
Well, she got some money, but it's so convoluted because the niece has asked and she says, well, but she even asked how much money did you get? Well, she won't say. It's just like maybe two of them are in cahoots against the brother who's schizophrenic. So nobody knows, but she keeps saying that her sister has taken money, but I think it's just a whole lot of things going on there with all three of them and the mom, what the mom had to put up with. And they think that that the CPA kind of threatened the mom also when she was alive and took money from her when she was alive.
Sounds like a nightmare. Yeah. Well, and I think this is why, just because the trustee is responsible for executing the terms of the trust, it's so important that you choose the right trustee and that you're really clear in there and you have someone overseeing it, right? We've had situations where, oh my God, it's been like a nightmare. And thank goodness, I can't really think of any problem where we haven't been able to get it resolved and get the wrong trustee out of there. The trustee does have a fiduciary duty, meaning they have to act in the best interest of the beneficiaries and manage the trust prudently and according to the instructions. So if they're not doing that, they're in violation. So as a CPA, if she's not, she could be in trouble, but somebody's got to do something about it. Really what they should be doing is requiring an annual accounting because that's typically what happens.
So I've seen instance where the trustee, even being a CPA, this is a different situation. They hold on to the assets so they can keep charging the fees and not even do the accounting or disperse the assets. I've seen that. That's insane.
Yeah, I think that one of the things I will just say is that when you're in smaller communities, boy, the things I have seen and heard go on is crazy. And you don't find that as much. I'm not saying it doesn't occur sometimes in more metropolitan areas, but one attorney who I know is acting as trustee and doing a lot of things. And boy, I mean, like going to court and lying, I mean, it was crazy. And she ended up losing, getting disbarred. But I do know that happens some, but I think in larger cities, there's just more people in the mix that are paying attention that when you have a bad egg, ultimately that bad egg, thank goodness, does get removed. But, it's something that we all have to be aware of.
Yeah.
So ongoing, let's just talk for 1 minute, just so people are clear on it, just to reiterate this. Can you just recap on the ongoing responsibilities of a trustee?
Well, to make sure everything gets done that the decedent wanted to have done, and be a fiduciary, do the right thing, and make sure that the beneficiaries get what they're supposed to get, when they are supposed to get it. So it's just overseeing it and being really good about everything and giving, like I said, it's all about keeping good records for everybody so nobody questions anything and just do a clean slate. How would you want to be treated is the thing that they should keep in mind.
Yeah, making sure there's really good records on all fronts, making sure they're filing taxes, they're doing everything they should. Yeah, that's great. So let's talk for 1 minute about compensation. What's typical for compensation for a trustee?
I think most times for individuals, if they are trustees, it's usually 1%. At least that's what it is here. And sometimes banks will charge a little bit more, and maybe trust companies where that's their main business may charge, a little bit more. And I think that is in relationship to how big the estate is. I think that makes a difference as well, how much, they will charge. But that's pretty much what's typical here.
Yeah, that's good. So let's talk for 1 second about succession planning, because I think a lot of times when somebody's setting up their estate plan, they're thinking like, okay, my daughter's a CPA or son who's a CPA is going to do it, but then they're not thinking beyond that. And so can you just kind of give us an overview of what else they should consider?
Well, they should make sure that they do have a successor trustee, because you never know at what point somebody cannot act as a trustee. And sometimes it's still another person, but usually it will then go to, they will have in line a bank or trust company, because they are permanent. They're not going to die. So that's what you do in the end to make sure it's covered.
Yeah. So even if you name, say, all your kids and however, or family members, ultimately you want to have some type of corporate trustee just to make sure you're taken care of.
Right.
So let's talk for 1 minute about professional advisors. I do want to reiterate one thing you said, which I agree so much. We have a provision in all of our documents where we stay on as the investment advisor, and obviously the trustees that it really typically, a lot of times we'll have the majority of beneficiaries, but the trustee along with the majority of beneficiaries can get rid of us if they do, but then they have to get somebody else that has a certain level of experience. And what we have found is that we require that they have some estate planning experience, whether it's financial planning or estate planning. And the reason we do that is because one of my first clients was like, I don't want them going to somebody that's just, like a stock jockey, just in and out of stocks and not looking at the big picture. And it was interesting because one of the attorneys had said, oh yeah, that's such great insight. So we've just kind of used that over the years. So that's one thing, but we can get out of it if we want, and they can get out of it. Having a trust protector, I cannot reiterate, because that way, if somebody's doing something wrong, because a lot of times they want to get rid of the advisors or the attorneys or the CPAs because they want to go and pierce the trust. And so the nice thing about that is having a trust protector in there is they could come and say yes or no and be able to look at the situation to make sure the person's doing what they're supposed to and that they're not just trying to get rid of somebody so they can go and blow all the money. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I do. I had this situation where the family had quite a bit of real estate and they were leaving that in the trust. One of the daughters who was going to inherit, she and her husband were splitting, and then they got back together, and he's wanting her to get that real estate so they can sell it and do something else with it. So they have a trust protector because her brother was the trustee, and daughter's husband was bugging him. Well, the daughter was actually. So the husband was bugging the daughter is bugging her brother about, I want my real estate so I can sell it. They have a trust protector so that is the line of defense against her keep bugging a brother about getting the real estate so her husband can sell it.
Let's talk about some of the pluses. I know you've touched on them a little bit, but let's talk about the pluses of having a corporate trustee.
Well, the corporate trustee is always going to be there, and you don't have to worry about, or shouldn't have to worry about, something going amiss. And they have access to the accountants, to the attorneys, and everything that they can take care of. And it's just continual. That's the real plus of a corporate trustee, is knowing it's going to continue on and they're going to follow what you say.
And I want to add two things to that, because I think the other thing is they know what to do. They know what has to be done as far as taxes go. They know what has to be done as far as accounting goes. So they've got processes in place, which is so different than a family member. So I think that's huge. And I think that they are also less emotional. Sometimes that's good and sometimes it's bad. I've seen ones where you have like a new corporate trustee, like it's one of their junior trustees, and it takes her forever to get back with the beneficiaries as far as getting money. And so, you probably want to have some provision in there that you can make sure you've got the relationship with the corporate trustee, that if the person that they have designated to handle your stuff, like the representative, is not doing their job, you can get somebody that is better at it. Because I've seen that where people say it was just a nightmare, or they liked one kid better than the other. So then they're just borderline on problems like, oh yeah, they approve this charge, but then they won't prove that one. And so you've got to be careful, because at the base of all this are humans. And even if you have a corporate trustee, you still have a human there. So do you have anything to add to that?
No, that's pretty much it as far as what you just said about that. And the other thing is, need a rapport. And so it's really important all the beneficiaries have the rapport with the corporate trustee person. And like you said, you don't want any favoritism. But that works on the other side as far as beneficiaries. they'll be reluctant to ask for what they need or ask questions because I'm telling you, it's so easy for people to be intimidated when people realize they don't, or they think they don't know, or they don't know as much as the person they're working with. And they just, if they think something's not right, they'll be hesitant to try to correct it.
Well, and I want to say one thing, and this is meant to all the women, because I find women fall into that trap more often than men. And they're afraid to ask something or like, this is a really dumb question. And I'm just here to tell you, if you have any advisor that when you ask a question, they're like, what? Or like, that was a dumb question. I mean, you've got the wrong advisor. And I think that, I don't know, I think having a female advisor in some ways can be better, not in all cases, but sometimes because they're able to listen to you. And as long as they're both competent, whether you're a man or a woman, as long as you feel like you can ask them anything and you don't feel dumb. I can't tell you how many women clients I've gotten because they're like, he just made me feel dumb. He just made me feel like I was really dumb and I already felt dumb and he just solidified my belief. And so I think that's something that no one should put up with. I think that it's unbelievable that we're still living in that today. But the point being is you shouldn't and you don't have to. And if you have that, then you should find someone else. Now, as far as fees go, just to clarify, corporate fees can either be a percentage assets if they're like managing it or a flat fee, like if they're being just the trustee.
Yes.
Okay.
That all can, with corporate, that can always be worked out, decided.
Trying to, negotiate it. And those fees should probably be negotiated before you name them in the trust.
Yeah, for sure. So you know what you're doing and not getting in and saying, oh my gosh, I had no idea it was going to be this amount.
And one of the things we do too is we'll name in there that the majority beneficiaries can appoint a new corporate trustee if they need to. Because we have had situations where we had one that was very well with advisors, but then they were sold. It was a bank and it was just a nightmare. They just seemed so unorganized. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is concerning. And so then we just started putting provisions in there that if we were unhappy with one, we could move to another. Now, if you do plan on having like independence where you have an investment advisor managing your money and then you've got a corporate trustee on the other side, you just want to make sure that the corporate trustee allows that because some corporate trustees will not be the trustee unless they're managing the money. So you got to check that out before.
Yeah. It is like a person really needs to know what they're doing and what they're getting before they get into it. For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So let's recap really quickly. And then if you have anything else to add, Susan, the first thing you got to really do is consider who you want to be trustee. If it's going to be a family member, ideally, you're not just having one child, but you're having a couple of them. You want to make sure they have the maturity and the responsibility to take that on. And if they're not doing their job, there should be some provision in there where either the majority of beneficiaries and or the trustee, or if they're the same, then maybe a trust protector can step in and replace them, especially if you think something's going wrong, like they are spending money or they're stealing money or something along those lines, which they're not allowed to do. The other thing you want to be aware of is if once you've named the trustees, is make sure you have a corporate trustee name. It's so important that you have some type of corporate trustee. And you want to consider if you want to have options so that your beneficiaries can name a new one if they're not doing their job. And sometimes you'll have a corporate trustee initially, and then once your children get older, then you can allow them to be the trustee. So again, you've got a lot of options there, but you just need to make sure that whatever you choose works for your situation and that you're choosing the right person and that you're not putting somebody in there that is a nightmare. Like I share the story, one of my clients, she was actually at one of my workshops, and this has happened like probably 4 times where I read a document and I'm like, who's Joe Blow? And they're like, oh, Joe. Oh, he was a really good friend. Turned out to be an alcoholic, turned out to be a drug addict, turned out to be a felon, whatever the scenario is. And, we just kind of lost touch. It's like, oh, did you know he's your co-trustee? They're like, what? Because they haven't reviewed their document in so long. That's why you got to have those financial checkups. You've got to have an estate planning checkup and a financial checkup. In fact, you can go to themillionairinsider.com/FC to access that free checkup. But the reason that's so important is so that you don't do your trust and then just go to sleep at the wheel. Susan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes. The thing about going to sleep at the wheel, having a trust, so many things change and about putting assets into the trust. And the other thing is that trust protector is so important because it's an outsider. And so many times families get all crazy about things, whether if it's a family member who's the trustee, and then the pressure on the trustee from the other siblings, if they all aren't trustees or you have two, that is a wreck. That
Yeah.
is a train wreck waiting to happen. So the trustee protector is somebody who's not into the mix. So they can just look at it from a different perspective from the family members. As I know, we both know that this estate things, no matter what it is, when it comes to getting money and assets, can be a nightmare all the way around with the way everybody acts.
Yeah. And when money gets involved, I always like people like, oh, well, they really like me. I'm like, well, when money starts getting involved, people change and it just gets really ugly really fast. It just has destroyed so many relationships because somebody feels that they've been jaded or they feel that something's not right. And so you just want to really give some thought to that. And a good financial advisor will help you do that. And the reason I say financial advisor over attorney is I think attorneys, obviously, in most states, they need to do the documents. But what I find is that most attorneys come into your life like for this slice of doing the estate plan, and they don't know a lot of these details. Whereas if you have a good financial advisor, they're like, yeah, but what about Sally? What about the fact that somebody's got some mental, disability? What about the fact that this person's a spendthrift? What about the fact that you don't trust this child's wife or husband? All those things that come into it that have such a huge impact that attorney may or may not know, and oftentimes doesn't know. And last but not least, which I think is critical, and I just say this because I've been doing this for over 3 decades and I've seen it so often, is you've got to have somebody who knows what they're doing review your trust. Because what I find is a lot of times, if you don't have somebody reviewing it, what ends up happening is there's provisions in there that are not compatible with what your ultimate goal is. Or sometimes they're using a prototype, right, that they've used before. We'll find names in there. The worst one is we found somebody named as a beneficiary who wasn't even a relative. It was obviously from a different document. I'm like, oh my God, that
My
would be
goodness.
such a nightmare. Yeah, that's a problem. So do you have anything else to add to
Yes.
that?
Yes. You know why, as financial advisors, we know more than the attorney because we meet with these people all the time. And you
Yeah.
know how it is. You become more or less the friend of the client as an advisor, and you hear all the
Yeah.
ins and outs, and clients tell you everything.
Yeah.
So you'll know
Yeah.
much more than the attorney because we might as well live in some of those houses with some of our clients.
Oh boy. Yeah, it's amazing what you learn. And I think somehow if somebody trusts you with their money, they trust you with a lot of things. And I don't take that lightly, but I know we're kind of joking here, but it's amazing what you hear and what you find out. That's critical information to ensure that your wishes come to fruition.
Yes.
And that's something to be really
Yes.
aware of. I want to just reiterate, if you have not had a financial checkup in a while, please go and do that. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/FC. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Susan, you've been a wealth of information. Thanks so much for coming back on the
Thanks for
podcast.
inviting me. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always so good to have these amazing experts on. And what I find is when we're talking about a technical topic that we've got expertise on, having two different people who have different perspectives and can add different insight is so much more helpful than just one person. And that's why I love having the different advisors on. You get to know them. So you resonate with them. You can reach out to them, but also it allows you to be able to get a different perspective of somebody who's seen the world of estate planning and trustees differently than I have. And so it's absolutely huge. And I think that, one of the things that we've also seen is even when you have the right trustee in place, if you have an unethical advisor, whether it's a financial advisor, a CPA, or an attorney, it can be a disaster. And we have seen so many situations where a lot of times it's interesting. I mean, I read a lot about financial advisors. Obviously, I'm not as privy to that because I'm the one dealing with it, so I wouldn't be. But I've seen a lot with CPAs, which is so hard for me to comprehend because the CPAs I know are so moral and ethical. And I mean, they wouldn't do anything. I mean, I don't believe they would do anything to harm a person. But in this situation, I mean, they've literally stolen money to the point of where some of them ended up in prison. So again, you just got to be aware and you got to make sure that you have the right team in place, not one person, but the right team. Anything you want to add before we conclude, Susan?
I don't think so. I think we got it covered pretty well.
Yeah, I think we did. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Bye for now.
Bye.
If you love the content of this podcast, please follow and subscribe to our channel so you get notified of episodes, and also give us a 5-star review and share a comment. We really appreciate it. Congratulations on taking another step to create a financially free life you love. If you're not sure about your financial future or that it's in order, or you are ready to stop worrying about money, or possibly the fear of becoming a bag lady, ending up broke in retirement, or you simply are ready to know your financial house is in order so that you can have a bright financial future, please go to themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. And that doesn't stand for non-sufficient funds. It stands for Next Step Finance. It's the next best step of what you need to do so you can avoid an NSF notice in your future. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. The number of women who were not broke or poor while working or married is staggering. The entire mission of the Wealth Inside and Out podcast is to ensure you have the information for you, your family, your friends, anyone who's willing to listen to it and apply it so that you can create a financially free life you love. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. Until our next episode, take one action that will help you create a financially free life you love. I'm Annette Ba'u, your host. All international copyrights are reserved. Bye for now.